Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and today I have something special for all of you. Today's topic is a little interesting and is a little different, where we are trying to uh, look at the thinking and reaction of Indians in the global and the pandemic situation. What are the reactions that we as a country, or we as the people of India, are having towards policies within the pandemic, or towards the political, social, and medical situation in the current global scenario? And for this, today we have a very special guest joining me. He was my senior in college as well, and currently has quite a bit of a youth following as an academician, which is very commendable. So I would like to welcome Dr. Mahibal Singh Rathore today, who will be joining me in a very insightful conversation about our nation per se, about the thinking of our nation per se. I would just, although he needs no introduction, I would like to give a small sort of a brief introduction, like I can, about him. He has been trained as a dentist from Manipur University. As I said, he was my senior in college, and he is an educator with study IQ, which is one of the largest digital education platforms in India, with 8 million subscribers on YouTube for students who are preparing to sit for the civil services examination. So he has had 5+ years of extensive teaching experience in both offline mediums as well as online mediums. And as many of you may know, has a lot of trending videos on YouTube, and with a very sizable social media following, which I would like to mention. He has around 54,000 followers on Instagram, which is quite a lot, 55,000 followers on Facebook, and around 23,000 followers on Twitter. So he is someone who people like to hear talk, and has substance in his insights, which he shares with his student population, which he shares with his audience. I intend to have a very compelling and interesting conversation with Dr. Rathore today, and interpret his insight as an educator on why the general population and youth are reacting and behaving the way they are in India during the time of the current crisis. And my intention of creating this video today will be to present to my audience, you guys, the reasons behind many unanswered situations seen in the country in recent times, politically and socially. Public reactions and the need to understand said reasons will, in my belief, be important to develop a framework of behavioral and influential barriers that prevent the spread of accurate information across different demographics within the country. So, from every tier of the society, we need accurate, correct information spread for the public to be well informed, and for them to be aware of the situation and prepare themselves accordingly. So, without further ado, I will now cut to the conversation that I am going to have with Dr. Rathore. Hope you guys learn something, or in case you have any criticisms against the things discussed, please do mention them in the comments at the end of the video. I will look forward to hearing from you. So I will cut to our conversation now, and then again I will catch you at the end of our conversation. So hope you guys enjoy. Cheers.
Hmm.
That's good. So today we are discussing an interesting sort of an outlook with you, because you are one of those, I always call educators the ground level data gatherers and interpreters of all demographics, because I think that educators are the first, like the level of contact between an authority and the public, because you're delivering information, you're trying to spread the right kind of information. So wanted to delve into your mind and
Hmm.
see how our Indian public thinks the way they do in different situations that they're experiencing in the present scenario during the
Okay.
COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay.
So basically, I will start with a very simple question. It's very common that we see every day, which was basically the entire social media frenzy, and how in our country very selective news receives a lot of attention, whereas similar news may not receive a lot of attention, or even if you stand up for that, or even if you bring that to awareness, people will not really take it up and move forward and talk about it. So I wanted to know, why do you think that selective news in India receives excess attention through social media? I will not even talk about TV media, like the elephant incident in Kerala, or the influence of Black Lives Matter as opposed to the anti-CAA protests. Then the issue of Sarfura Zargar and Umar Khalid, as opposed to Pragya Thakur's incident. So I want to know what exactly is the issue that drives people to prefer something over the other. They might be equally distressing.
First of all, Kasturi, thank you for having me on your channel. And the question that you asked, that why selective news gathers more attention. See, the
Yes.
first thing that what I have seen in the past few years is that people want to latch on to something that is very convenient to latch on. For example, an elephant dying in Kerala.
Hmm.
So that news, you can outrage over it
Hmm.
very easily. You don't
Hmm.
need to do anything. All you need
Correct.
to do is type a post on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever, and you have become part of the bandwagon, the social
Hmm.
media bandwagon, where you are criticizing something and you're part of a bigger culture that wants to look cool and they want to seem like keyboard warriors.
Hmm.
There's nothing wrong with it. I
Hmm.
feel that some issues have to be taken on in social media. They need more attention, definitely.
Yes.
But our approach is selective because A, we don't want to delve into the deeper political mess that is there in India right now.
Hmm.
Some people want to go into it, but not everybody. For example,
Hmm.
somebody who is going about his job, they are going about their businesses. They don't want to get into that debate that who's right, who's wrong, whether CA is correct, whether CA is wrong for me. An average middle class Indian simply wants to do his job, simply wants to do his business, and does not want to take a very highly ideological positioning,
Hmm.
because they don't want to risk their opportunities, they don't want to risk their connections, and at the end of the day, they don't want to isolate themselves. For example, if I take a certain position on CA and I see the entire friend circle of mine taking an opposite position,
Hmm.
so people are going to feel isolated over political issues. And such is the social commentary and the social outlook of people these days, that they think that friendships and relations are part of the political thinking and the political thought.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be. Your politics can be separate, your friendships can be separate, but people are selective about this because they think that politics has become a part and parcel of our life. Well, it should be, but only for the political part. It should not come into our social and family life.
Hmm. Do you
And
think
regarding the
it's
issues and regarding the
Hmm.
Black Lives Matter and the Indian CA issue that you asked, it's a really good question, that people did not outrage about, let's say, Safura Zagar going to jail when she was pregnant, but they were
exactly?
outraged when a person who was living thousands of kilometers away was arrested by the police. So that again is a mentality that we have in India, that we see the evil that is far away, but we don't see the evil that is right next to us. For example, even the Tamil Nadu incident, it took about a week or so for social media to outrage when they died on 22nd and 23rd of June, I think.
23rd,
And
yeah.
it was all over the internet after 1 week of their death.
Yes.
So we don't want to criticize our own political structures because we feel that we are a part of those structures. Some of our relatives may be in police, some of our family members may be in the police. So we are not comfortable criticizing police or the government or the local politics or the local administration as decidedly or as critically as we can say about USA or UK governments,
Hmm.
because it doesn't affect our lives. To people highly critical or vocal about issues that are far away rather than their own country.
Hmm. I also think, like, from your insight, I also feel like somehow it's an ingrained colonial nature, that entire 200 years, where the general public, regular people, they were forced to not question the ruling, whatever the ruling authority was. Somehow I think it has trickled down into the generation here also, and the youth, which is trying to break the mold, is being blacklisted as, some
Yes, that is
unwanted
there.
elements.
You're right. Some amount of that attitude that don't question the ruling authorities, that
Exactly.
has trickled down. And I would say not just from the British period, even before that. Because basically what the structure was, it was not a democratic structure. Even before
No,
the British or even the
absolutely.
Mughals, or you go back as far as you can.
Yes.
So it was not exactly democracy as it is today. Yes, there were avenues where you could talk
Hmm.
about stuff, but a general common man could never question the ruling king. He could never question the ruling in the British time period, the collector. That
Correct.
was just out of the question. So it has
Exactly.
become a part and parcel of our social life that whatever the authorities are doing or saying, it must be correct. Now,
Exactly.
to some extent, in civilizations like India, or let me say that developing countries like India,
Hmm.
without that attitude, there would be too much of protests, which
Correct.
again is not good for a country. You need some kind of social stability. You need some kind of control, some kind of authority from the government to keep the
Hmm.
country united, a country as diverse as ours. So
Absolutely.
yes, that attitude did help India in uniting us.
Hmm.
But as the social codes have changed, as we see
Yes.
in the West, the democracies have really flowered. Some of them have, not all of them.
Hmm.
But at least in the freedom of speech aspect, I would say most of the Western democracies have given freedom of speech to everybody.
Yes.
And that effect is slowly trickling down to India.
Hmm.
And as soon as it trickles down, especially in the generation that has seen journalism after 1990s, I would say, after the advent of internet especially, so those people started criticizing the government, rightly so in many aspects, and they are being subdued by their maybe their parents, not all
Hmm.
the time, but in
Hmm.
some cases, yes. So it is a generational shift, and I think it has been too sudden. And according to my personal opinion, it's internet is responsible for much of that, for most of these things. So this will take time. It will take at least 2 to 3 generations to change. And what we are seeing is a generational shift happening in just 10 or 15 years. There was no Facebook 15 years ago. So
Correct.
if you wanted to outrage against the government, the only avenue you had was the print newspaper. If you wrote a column, you could outrage. But today, if you're on Facebook, you're on Twitter, you can outrage against your government any given day, any given of time.
Yes. Right now we have more avenues, but I believe that I think as a growing democracy now, because I think it's been 70 plus years in a democracy, I believe that in a growing democracy now, I think making people aware of their strength as the republic, I think becomes more important. Breaking that mold of, lacking self-reflection and then depending on authority is very important. I feel like this from, from the big picture. But yeah, so this was one main question that kept coming inside my head. So moving on to the next question, pretty cliched question, but I think still an important question for a public health professional like me. So I wanted to know about the entire lockdown. What do you think about the entire lockdown that was imposed? And why do you think, why in your opinion do you think that, once the lockdown got imposed, within the lockdown the cases started increasing, and these started coming up? Do you think that there is a government involvement in it more, or is it public, is it public mishandling of the pandemic situation? What exactly do you think it is? What are the factors that you think played a role in this?
See, first of all, when the lockdown was implemented, that
Hmm.
was back in March. So
Yes.
most of the governments had implemented a lockdown for the first time in, I would say, what, 4 generations. The last
Yes.
time such lockdowns happened was way back during the Spanish flu in 1919 and 1920.
Yes.
So we don't have a recent memory about those lockdowns. How did the
Hmm.
government officials function? What exactly was done? What exactly wasn't done? So
Hmm.
for everybody involved in this, from the government point of view, it
Hmm.
was for the first time that they were going about a lockdown in
Hmm.
their lives, in their grandfather's lives.
Hmm.
So that is where, see, research and reading comes in. And again, we were unlucky that not much literature exists about the Spanish flu. In fact, not even in the US, there's hardly any literature available to the
Yeah,
government
not that
officials.
much. Not really. Yeah.
So what they did was they just started a lockdown. Obviously, that was the correct approach. Public health
Hmm.
officials were guiding them. But again, a lockdown is not a solution for everything. It's not the panacea.
Correct.
After implementing a lockdown, what was needed was tracing the contacts, isolating them, and wherever symptoms were being shown, you had to treat them. In that aspect, we were lacking. especially countries like India were lacking. And whichever country did that, whoever traced properly, isolated the contacts, they were quite successful in implementing the lockdowns.
Yes.
And that is where overall public health infrastructure comes into play.
Absolutely.
So anyways, in India, the public health infrastructure is not that good. The number of beds we have per 1,000 people is not up to the mark what it should be. But still, I would say for a country like India, where people were expecting there would be cases in crores, we are not there yet. And even today, as I speak, we have crossed the 6 lakh mark. So for a
Yes.
population of 135 crores, 6 lakh cases compared to the countries like Italy or Spain, we are not there yet, because those countries have populations of 4, 5, 6 crores and they had
Yeah.
3 lakh, three and a
Barely
half lakh
4.5
cases.
million. Yes.
But definitely the lockdown could have been implemented better if the
Hmm.
understanding was more about tracing. What
Hmm.
the lockdown became was more of an administrative tool to stop the people moving around. That was the correct approach,
Hmm.
but not the completely correct approach. What was needed was the medical side that was lacking from the government, basically the
Hmm.
health authorities. So they
Hmm.
did their best wherever cases started. For example, Indore is a good example. Indore started
Yes.
tracing pretty quickly when the cases were in the hundreds, but many
Yes.
cities did not do that. And after 1 month or so, what I felt here was that people started taking the lockdown lightly. I mean, after
Hmm.
1 month, that fear of corona was gone. In March, everybody was scared of this disease. By the end of April, no one was scared of the disease. As I speak right now, the cases started coming in my district about 20 days back.
Hmm.
So even today, there's no complete shutdown. It's just a partial lockdown of the alleys or
Correct.
the areas where cases are there. And apart from that, the entire place is open. All the shops are functioning as they should be. So that fear of corona is gone now. And I think that fear was important till March and April. And as that fear goes away, we will see more and more cases coming in, until and unless there is some drastic step taken for tracing and isolating the contacts.
Hmm.
So as far as the government is involved, I say that yes, there was partial failure on the part about tracing, but I don't think that they were wrong in bringing about a lockdown.
Hmm.
Obviously, they did mismanage a few things like the migrants issue. Nobody foresaw that, and they should have, because there are so many people sitting in the government. They should have foreseen that something like this will happen. And the trains were started too late. They started in
Hmm.
May. They could have started the trains in April as well. So that was one of the major aspects that I was not very happy about. And apart from that, I think the measures taken for stopping coronavirus were sufficient by the government.
I would like to comment. I mean, people think that I'm very anti-government and anti-national and stuff, but I would like to comment on their, initiative toward building the big hospitals, the big areas, the quarantining areas in Delhi as well as in Bombay. It's not a small feat to achieve. Look at the USA. The country is falling apart. The government is not doing anything to actually manage the rising COVID-19 cases, which I have to give credit to India. Although I am in agreement with you that lockdown was the right step, as a public health professional, even I felt the same thing. But what I had thought that as a country, because it's 1.3 billion people, in India, the lockdown should have been implemented in the course of a few weeks, not on one day and not everything being closed in one day. That
Yes,
would
for
have
example, South Africa did that. They gave 3 days for people to go back to their homes, and they implemented the
absolutely.
lockdown from 27th March.
Ireland did that for 1.5 weeks. Ireland was on social isolation for around 2 weeks. Ireland went into lockdown a week after India went into lockdown. So the first 2 weeks, they had given the public the provision to even indulge in panic buying. Imagine, to indulge in panic buying, also to buy everything in stock and everything, keep everyone at home, shut the offices in phases. First construction was shut, then some other sector was shut, then the IT was shut, and healthcare was not shut at all because of obvious reasons. But this way it was shut, and then the lockdown completely got imposed. I think India. I think if it had taken a little bit more time, I believe this after effect would have been a little lesser. Maybe the initial surge of cases would have been more. I will take this also into consideration, and I think according to your insight also, this makes more sense. And with the people's reaction, I completely agree with you. I think, as a country which is a developing country and the common people who need to earn money for their living, I think what doesn't affect them, like, in a passing situation, if they think, they're not being affected by the disease, then their fear of that, following social distancing rules and following these quarantining protocols will reduce. I think that's a very big sort of a
The fear of
barrier.
hunger is much more than the fear of an unseen virus.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like, I either die of hunger or I die of coronavirus. Like, what do you want me to do? Which is a very catch-22 like situation also in India, I believe. This needs further research and further input from the public itself to build a more interactive sort of an intervention approach, I believe. Just my personal opinion. But yeah, so basically, this question gives rise to my third question, which was, I wanted to know about the national issues that is surrounding India during lockdown, just before lockdown, and their very distinct bipartisan reactions. With the lockdown, with the NRC, with the economic downfall, or with the Make in India campaign, now the China incident in Galwan Valley and getting TikTok banned. What do you think? Why do you think there are less people who are in the center, like, who are neither on this extreme or on the other extreme in our population, but you have to belong to, these two groups, as we call it? Why do you think this is more prevalent?
I feel that it is part of the larger trend across the world where centrist approach and centrist ideology is just fading away. Either you are absolutely left or you are absolutely right, if we speak on the Western political spectrum per se. And in India, either you are completely pro BJP or you are completely pro Congress.
Hmm.
People tend to think that there is no central approach, which is wrong. And
Correct.
that has been there because I think that we are completely in election mode almost all of the time of the year. If you see that we have some state election or the other coming up every 5 or 4 months or 6 months. So what it does is that it keeps India, it keeps the politicians, and it keeps all the citizens of the nation into that election mode per se. And that election
Hmm.
mode is that area or that zone where you can take extreme point of views and nobody minds.
Hmm.
And that happens everywhere. Even right now, if you see the statements by Trump or you see the statements by Joe Biden, they would be at the extreme ends. If you see the
Correct.
statements by political leaders in Bihar, which has an election coming up in few months, they would be at the extreme ends. And that is only because of the elections, because you need to
Hmm.
take extreme approach. So when we have elections again and again, all the top national political leaders, they want to seem to take some drastic position in the public. And that is wrong. So I think that once we get out of that election mode,
Hmm.
the leaders will realize that there is a central approach and people will follow them if they go for the centrist approach. So even if you look at the issues such as the India-China border clash,
Yes.
instead of uniting together as one country, there were
Yeah.
people in both the political parties, both the national political parties, who were playing the blame game. Congress was saying that BJP leaders had some photographs clicked with the Chinese
Hmm.
Communist Party. Some BJP leader visited their headquarters way back in 2008. BJP again brought out that the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation was funded by the Communist Party. Yes, all those things may be right, but right now what we need is everybody standing together, standing united. So this bipartisan approach is hurting us. And I think the reason behind all these bipartisan politics going on is elections, because we have Bihar elections coming up in few months. I don't know how that will be conducted, but it is going to be conducted, obviously, maybe with social distancing. That remains to be seen. But ultimately, elections is the biggest cause that we are always in that extreme mode in India.
Correct. Would you also consider this kind of a, the reception of the, extremes that we are talking about to be a result of the audience's receptiveness toward extremist ideology? Romanticizing extremist ideology is very easy. Centrist is more logical. You don't really have that emotional component involved if you are, in the centrist ideology. Do you think that plays a very big factor in a country that is influenced very emotionally in every aspect?
Yes, it does. To give you an example, recently we have had 3 commander level talks with the Chinese regarding
Hmm.
the border clashes.
Hmm.
But you will see hardly any coverage about that in the news. You won't see any social media
Yes.
posts about that. But that is more important rather than banning apps. What we are
Exactly.
doing, we are having talks at the commander level. Lieutenant General is talking with their equivalent officer,
Hmm.
and we are trying to sort it out. and 3 rounds of talks have taken place, and we need more coverage about those issues of those
Exactly.
meetings. But that central approach won't go on the prime time. It will never go on the prime time because it is not polarizing enough. You can't have a debate about a military commander level talk for 1 hour.
Exactly.
But what you can do is have a talk about TikTok and any other app that was banned. I
And then
mean,
fight.
yes, that step may have been correct in isolation, but what we are having is we are having a completely sideways debate, which is not even relevant to the border issue right now.
Correct.
So
Absolutely. I was thinking of the same thing, that we are a country that is full of emotional people. This receives more attention, like our brain is wired to get more attention from this kind of a news than it is from informative discussions where you gather data or knowledge instead of forming an opinion. I think that's more
just to give
appealing.
you another example of that, the state of Manipur in Northeast India, it
Yes,
has managed the COVID situation very well. They
very well.
have had good quarantine centers and they are doing good in the COVID
Yes.
numbers. But there is hardly any coverage about that in the news media. All we see is the negative coverage. Now, see, the human brain is wired like that. I get it that negative news latches onto our brain quickly. So you will see more news about Delhi or Mumbai instead of states like Manipur, instead of states like Goa, which have done quite well in
Very
containing the
well.
numbers.
Sikkim
Yeah,
also.
yeah, even Sikkim. Yes, all these states are doing pretty good, but there's hardly any coverage about that. So that
Exactly.
again shows that yes, news which is not masala enough does not sell on the news channels and sometimes even newspapers.
What do you think? Because I think I've covered the next two questions that I had to ask you, that has been covered in my first three questions only. But what do you think will actually work in our population to propel them towards an understanding perspective instead of a blinder, application of a blinder perspective? What do you think will work? What kind of an
Education,
approach?
education, nothing else. Our education level is not at all good right now. Even if you see the number of graduates in the country, it's not more than 15%. And that
Hmm.
is counting all the diplomas and ITIs. If you count them, that is
Hmm.
the percentage of people who are graduating from college right now. So
Correct.
what we need is better education, an education that gives everybody critical thinking. What
Hmm.
we have right now in schools is more of rote learning, that this is the book, this is the chapter, these are the 5 questions that will be asked. Inko rat lo, inko pad lo, you'll pass the exam. What
Exactly.
is needed is more of critical analysis, which our curriculum and our books are lacking right now. And as and when the education system develops more and more, we will see more of critical thinkers. It will filter down. It might take 3 or 4 generations, but we will get there.
Hmm. Do you think that the current youth, us millennials, you and I, do you think we are actually, our generation is somehow trying to, undo, these years of these conditionings that we had in our country, and they're starting to develop something novel, which is why, the middle-aged people or the senior citizens somehow are always in clash with, our generation because of this different approach that they have toward understanding things.
Yes, I think we are. There are many issues that have been taken up by the millennial generation, which I don't think that the earlier generation would have taken up. But
Absolutely.
again, if you see from their perspective, these are some drastic changes. So
Hmm.
they will not be very much okay with that,
Hmm.
although many are, but not everybody. And this is part of the generational shift that has been there since the early 20th century. So that
Correct.
is why you have all these generations like uh, the the millennials, and before that there was the generation. Just hold on. Lost.
Generation Y, or
The
I think.
lost, it started from the lost generation. So just let me just recollect that.
Yes, yes.
So you see, from the early 20th century, you have all these categorization, that the lost generation, the great generation that fought
Oh,
the World
yes.
War II, the
Correct.
baby boomers, the generation X, the generation Y, all these generations, they have brought their own new changes. They brought their own revolutions. They did great deeds by themselves. For example, in the 1960s and 70s, India had a lot of protests. US had a lot of protests. In
Absolutely.
fact, the entire generation of politicians that is there in India right now, most of them had their political beginnings from the 1970s, the
Emergency.
pre-emergency protest.
Exactly.
All of those politicians are from that generation, from that school of protest before the emergency. So
Exactly.
yes, they were radicals at that time. In fact, if you just look up into the political histories of leaders like Ramdas Athavale, they were considered to be too radical for their age. And today they are part of the system. So that is what happens every time. Today, the people, the leaders, the young leaders who seem to be too radical, 20, 30 years down the line, they will be part of the
Part of
system.
the
They
system.
will be in positions of power, and the generation coming after us, they will feel that these guys are out of touch. These guys are just too old to understand the issues of 2040s or 2050s.
I think radicalization also needs to evolve with the changing times. Even if you're radical, you need to be a little logically like trending, which I think the Modi government has done very well. They're very much in line with the modern, forthcomings or whatever modern experiences that people are having, and to, correlate their entire political agenda with the daily lives of the public. I think that's a very commendable thing that our current
And
Indian
I would
government
like
is
to
doing.
comment on certain laws that they are changing also. For example, the medical termination of pregnancy, that
Yes,
old law was there. They
yes,
amended it recently so that the termination can be done few weeks into the pregnancy as well. So
yes.
it's not that they are completely out of sync. They are in sync with the need of the hour. Whatever new laws have to be brought, they are doing that. But again, some certain agendas, they are quite behind
Obviously.
the millennial approach or the millennial needs of the hour.
Exactly. Exactly. That's how you reach, the young minds, and then you make them yours. And we all get influenced by things. It's not just, I'm not blaming anybody. But I think this sort of a discussion is important for us as Indians also to reflect, sit back and reflect on ourselves and say that, we keep blaming somebody else or the other for, the bad plight of our country. It's high time that we wake up and we realize that our own self awareness will give rise to a better government, or to better legislations, or to a better judiciary, because then you will question things. I think questioning, which comes from education, as you were saying, that questioning needs to be developed again, not to just accept what is being said, I believe.
True, true. And as you said, we have to change ourselves first. So
Exactly.
देश तभी बदलेगा जब हम बदलेंगे. So
Ekdam.
the change has to begin from us, and I think it has started. The young millennials who are going into politics, who are going into administration, I think they will bring about some good changes in the coming 20 or 30 years.
Absolutely. I too hope the same, because these days I have very engaging conversations with my peers and friends, and everyone is, reading up on their political science and history, which is very good to see, which I really like. So, but this has been such an engaging conversation, Dr. Rathore, my pulsar. I call you my pulsar, so I'll call you my pulsar only. And very interesting insights that I have gathered from you, which are very relevant, very, very visible, but people, don't see it with their naked eye, and which need to be talked about, discussed about, and interventions, not just educational, but health interventions should also be developed around these psychologies. I think these, branches of psychology of the Indian brain, I think we'll be able to progress very well. We are a very intelligent country.
We certainly are, and I'm quite hopeful that we will.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mahipal sir, for being a part of this video discussion, for being a part of this chat and this question and answer round. It was great talking to you, great getting insights from you. I hope to get more insights from you, because I learn a lot from you in different other topics, and hope to see more of your videos. Those are my daily dose of current affairs and, GK as we know it.
Certainly.
Thank you so much, Mahipal sir.
Thank you for having me over.